decades of entertainment. Second City, for you who don't know what Second City Improv group is, or Troupe.
Troupe.
So that is where, like, if you think of the major comedic actors, Mike Myers, Chris Redd, I want to say Kristen Wiig too.
Chris Redd's a good guy. I'm glad you're bringing him up because we did a lot of shows together when he was at the Second City.
Dude is, when I think of someone whose expression, who's so good at that, Chris Redd top of the list. So he's great. Didn't Will Ferrell do a little bit of time?
No, not Will Ferrell. But at a place I studied as well in LA, he's from a place called the Groundlings.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of. Okay. And so Mike Myers came out of Second City, right? I want to say Chris Farley did
I met Chris Farley at the Second City. Oh. So it was great, but I feel it's kind of like a lost moment where I saw him. I was at a show. The Second City had different branches, and I was at the one in Detroit with my dad. And we're sitting there, and I'm looking at the playbill, the program, and there's a guy in the cast named John Farley. And I go, Second City, Farley? I go, surely, I wonder, and as I think, I wonder how the connection, as I'm thinking that, Chris Farley walks in front of us and sits down.
What year was this?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh my God.
And I asked, admittedly, for, because later in his career, he's real coked up.
He's still fairly healthy at this point. It's, I think it's right, like when Black Sheep is going to come out or something like that. Okay. So he walks in front and he looks like you want him to look. He's got a bright green tie. He's got a jacket like the motivational speaker. He's got black frame glasses. And he sits down and he's very, of course, like any good audience member, he doesn't distract from the show, but people, I'm sure, are like, holy shit, it's Chris Farley. So at intermission, I go out and I talk to him. And my interaction was kind of stupid because I was young and I just didn't know what to say. And all I said was like, I was just like, you're the best, man. That's all I said. I looked back and I go, that's not very, like a super intelligent thing. But he was super nice. Now, my dad had a better interaction because my dad goes, hey, we saw you on ESPN last night. And what had happened the night before, Chris was in Chicago at a Blackhawks game. And at intermission, one of the period breaks, they did this thing where they put a slate in front of the net with 3 slots exactly the size of a puck. And they get some radio contest guy and they go, if you can make one of these pucks through any of those slots, you're going to win this Toyota Tacoma. And so they go, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chicago's native son, although he's from Wisconsin, Chris Farley. So he comes out, dressed pretty much like how I saw him. He's got the tie and the glasses and the jacket. And he's doing his thing, and he falls down on the ice, and everyone goes crazy, and then magic happens. He grabs the puck from the guy who's about to take the shot, and he just slap shots. And the puck goes perfectly through the center slot. And the United Center melted.
That's awesome.
It levitated. So my dad brought that up, and Chris was like, you saw that? He was like a little kid. Oh my God, you saw that?
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the amazing people over at Chop Chili Company. Guys, they are the original sponsor of this podcast, and I could not be happier to continue to be working with these guys. I get it. It's New Mexico. Everyone loves red, green, both. But this genuinely is my favorite brand of chili here in the state of New Mexico, and I love being able to partner up with these guys. They are absolutely phenomenal. Zane and the rest of the team at Chop Chili do an amazing job running that company, and they make an absolutely phenomenal product. And right now, they are running a very special promotional on their Instagram. Go check them out on Instagram. Go give them a follow. And as they post pictures with the hashtag Where's My Chili Challenge, if you can guess where in New Mexico that picture was taken, you can win not only free red or green chili, but also a free custom t-shirt directly from the company themselves. Again, go check them out on Instagram, give them a follow, check out their hashtag Where's My Chili Challenge. Win yourself some free chili, win yourself some free shirts. They are also available in Smith's, Albertsons, Sprouts, and a ton of other grocery stores in the state of New Mexico, as well as El Paso, and they are expanding out to West Texas. Again, thank you so much to Zane and the rest of his amazing team over at Chop Chili. Back to the episode.
The other weird thing about the night was I noticed in my little 19-year-old, 18-year-old brain that every frat guy that came up to him and was like, I want to do a drink with Chris Farley, he turned no one down.
Oh, I'm sure.
And in my little brain, I didn't have really a sense of how human behavior worked at the time. Even in my little brain, I was like, oh, that's bad. There's something bad about these interactions where every guy, shot, beer, everyone he couldn't say no. And David Spade has said in interviews, like, he had to keep the show moving with Farley. Like, all right, we're done here. Come on, let's go. And then the cool, happier end to my interaction with the family was I did a movie with his brother Kevin Farley, who's a stand-up.
I was gonna say, because his brother does stand-up now too, right?
Yeah.
Or he's been doing stand-up.
Been doing stand-up a long time.
Yeah.
And so we worked on a movie in Ireland. It was like a dream situation. And his mother, Mrs. Farley, came. And I was so nervous because Kevin looks a lot like Chris. And I was like, please don't say Chris. Don't say Chris. But they put me at ease like the first day when we broke for lunch or whatever. I sat with him and his mom. And all they did was tell Chris stories.
Oh, man.
And I was just like, this is the great. That's my favorite thing about TV shows or movies. I just shut up and I throw a little thing out. And I'm like, what was this person like? And then I just absorb all of it. Because I still, like, we're talking about the passion of it. I still love entertainment so much where I'll be like, and then what about that one episode or whatever? The Farley's favorite episode of SNL with Chris is the one where I think he's sitting next to Janine Garofalo, so it's kind of a different cast. But he's at SeaWorld, and they say, all right, everybody, here comes Shamu. And every time Shamu comes around, these guys off camera douse Farley with like 5 buckets of water, and only he gets wet every time. They said that's the family's favorite episode. And I watched it recently, and I go, it's pretty damn funny.
I'm sure those interactions like that mean the world to them. You know, I mean, especially when, because people enjoy talking about themselves, their favorite people in general, but especially when it's a loved one that dies too soon. It's like, that's how you keep people alive.
They kept it, that Irish spirit of like constantly keeping them afloat. And what I loved too was they're all funny. I thought, like, well, in a family like that, Chris was probably the supernova. John Farley's this great character actor, super funny. Kevin, as funny as they come. Mrs. Farley, the mom, hilarious. Like, I think there's somewhere in there, like, one of the brothers, I think, is an accountant or something. I'm sure he's funny, too. But it was such a cool experience to be like, because Chris Farley, like, a lot of people, I mean, he was so influential when I was teaching at the Second City. I would have people in the class years after his death still emulate his style in class.
Yeah.
And I would just be like, that's power, man.
Yeah.
They would somehow in his voice or something with their choices there, you know, not good for comedy to just copy somebody. But I would just be like, wow.
Well, you tend to emulate the people that you look up to or the people that you follow the most.
Who is that for you?
I don't know yet.
I'll tell you mine. I rip off Letterman a billion times. Like, I would love to meet him just to be like, thank you for giving me an early identity that I could play with. Because I know that's what I've done.
Isn't it funny that a lot of people don't know that Letterman was a stand-up and that he was like one of the very first golden childs of the Comedy Store?
Yeah, what's funny though, you know,
he's so known for that, for his late night,
for hosting, yeah.
Obviously,
well,
he's like the guy.
It's funny. He's told many. It's just his style. Many self-deprecating stories, where. He says he was kind of like a throwaway guy, which makes sense when he eventually became a host. But then people like the late, great Norm Macdonald could quote his act. So you're like, okay, he had a real act. He wasn't just up there screwing around. But also he was very like deferential to people. Like, he remembers when he saw Robin Williams for the first time there, and he was like, we should all just quit show business. But I love Letterman. And my weird thing, one of the greatest days ever in my life. There's days like I'm sure you have the same thing. They all remember forever. Letterman's last year, I was at a taping in New York, and little me from Farmington, New Mexico, was on the top 10 list.
Oh, shit.
So I used to, very briefly...
I really don't know what you're talking about. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, Dave used to do this. Stephen Colbert is the host of the show that Dave used to do on CBS. And David Letterman had things like Stupid Human Tricks. He had these segments he would do like SNL has Weekend Update, regular segments. And one of them was called the... top 10 list, and it's become like a trope that people still use in different forms. But anyways, it's like a list of 10 things that pay off the subject. So when I was there, the way I was even on the list is Dave would come out and take questions from the audience, and it was his last year. And I was sitting like pretty close to the stage, house right, and he goes, anybody? And I shot my hand up. I was with my buddy Jesus, this funny guy from El Paso who works in entertainment too, but he's not a comedian. But we both love Letterman. So he shot up his hand, and I was like, Dave, what's next? And I had to shout because Dave was a ways away, and he's a master of controlling his room like all comedians. And he goes, first off, he's like, come on, lower your voice, man. And everyone goes crazy. The audience goes crazy. And I go, oh, this is great. He's kind of roasting me. And then I go, what's next, Dave? Politics? He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, what about you? What do you do? And I was like trying to go, do I try to make something up? And I go, just tell him the truth. I go, well, I work for the Second City. And he goes, oh, sure. He goes, so you live in Chicago? Actually, I live in New Mexico. And then they fly me to gigs and stuff. Because at that point, that's what I was doing. I didn't have to live in Chicago anymore. And he goes, this sounds made up. And everyone laughs. And then I had this weird feeling. The top 10 list was top 10 things to impress a first date. Things to say to impress a first date. And he goes through and he goes, number 2, tell her you flew in from New Mexico. And then I can see out of the corner of my eye on the monitor, the camera goes on me. And so I just do this. And everyone goes crazy. I'm getting a laugh from Dave's audience. So the fun follow-up was, that night, I flew out of, there used to be I don't know if there still is, but JetBlue used to fly direct New York to Albuquerque. So about an hour into the flight, I go, oh, there's live TV. I turn it on. They have CBS. As I turn it on, I'm on the top 10 list. I grab the flight attendant. I kind of tell somebody, as she's walking by, I go, look at this. And she looks at me. I'm wearing the same clothes. And she looks at the screen. She goes, well, you drink free the rest of the flight. And I go, how insane is that coincidence?
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's one of my favorite days of my entire... Oh, and then, because I'm a nerd about Letterman, I asked the stagehand, there was like a stagehand, and I go, is there any way I could get the top 10 card? He used to hold these blue giant index cards to read these jokes. And the guy's like, oh, buddy, that's a tough ask. So as I'm leaving, the stagehand comes over, he gives me the card, and he gives me Dave's pencil from the show, and I have both of those. And then a previous taping, because I'm a nerd, I got a cue card with a full joke on it, so I have this framed thing.
I was going to say that's
cue
you
card.
get framed.
Yeah, it's the best I have.
That's insane.
I don't have many prized possessions. You know, I try to stay kind of fluid because I'm always traveling and everything. But that's something where I'm like, oh, that's a prized possession.
Yeah.
And now it's funny because he's been gone long enough. It's like you say, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, the guy that does interviews on Netflix? yeah, but there's a whole career behind this guy.
It's just interesting following like the lineage of what. It's funny now because like I'll watch not very often, but every so often I'll see like Jimmy Kimmel clips or like or, like Fallon clips on YouTube, and it's funny how they've changed from like the traditional. And I've heard my friends talk about this too, where it's like they'll change from like traditional late night questions to almost like you can just see in the titles too, where it's like late night questions to almost like podcast style questions and podcast style quotes and stuff like that and formatting. And it's like, well, that's all fine and good, but there is none of that if there isn't Letterman, and there's no Letterman if there isn't any Johnny Carson. And it's just funny seeing like the through line from like Carson to Rogan and how all that goes. And it's I can understand why that's your prized possession. That's or one of those.
It was great. And I watched the interview the other night with Letterman. GQ did this cover story. It's a video interview, and it was so great because Letterman right off the bat he goes, all I did, because I always feel guilty sometimes. I'm like, man, I really have emulated Letterman a lot throughout my early days. And he goes, all I did in my career was I just ripped off Steve Allen, who was the predecessor before Letterman. And Steve Allen's interesting because he was the first guy ever to do man in the street bits. You know, you see Billy... I
hate putting on my phone during a podcast, but I gotta look this guy up.
No, please, yeah, look this up. Steve Allen, and he was the first guy to do weird stuff on talk shows and do man in the street where you just interview normal people.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I've seen this guy.
So I like that Letterman goes like, all we did was like rip off Steve Allen. And then the other thing I love that Letterman did is he reminded me, he goes, I started off, I was a weatherman, I started off broadcasting and radio and stuff, and I started, after the magic stuff, I got into radio, and it reminded me, it's kind of like, to a certain degree, doing comedy in a place like Albuquerque, where when I did radio, I just did it because I loved it. I didn't think when I was doing radio when I started, I would do weird stuff. I'd do Letterman type stuff or Steve Allen type stuff in my own kind of weird style. But this interview, when he said that, I go, oh yeah, I used to just do it because I loved it. When you're doing radio in Farmington, New Mexico, it's going nowhere. No one cares. The title of my autobiography is going to be "None of This Is Going Anywhere." It's just not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But it reminded me, watching him, I go, oh, my idol delivers again. Because I'm like, that's it. You have to do it because you love it. When I first started doing ships, I was with the Second City, and I'd already done stages in Chicago, and I was on what they call the main stage, which is the big thing you want to get on. And I was like, and they were like, well, we got enough tall white guys to last a lifetime.
So the main stage, is that a comedy club? Like
the main stage is what they call the stage within the Second City Theater.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay.
And what's cool and very intimidating when you start is the main stage is like, this is where John Belushi first started. This is where Tina Fey first got comfortable. This is where Steve Carell, and you're just like, and they're like, this is where Keegan-Michael Key. And you're just like, oh.
I've never been like driven to improv very much, but I've loved film and I like movies and TV shows. But like, the only thing that has convinced me like maybe I should try it out is because of people like Steve Carell and Tina Fey that I just grew up, and Amy Poehler that I just grew up idolizing. Like The Office. Like I remember watching The Office when it was so funny. Like I remember watching The Office as it was airing. Right, my buddies would have like the DVDs. If you like more, go right ahead.
Well, think about it. Yeah, I was the same way. I still have a lot of those DVD seasons.
And then it was funny. Like I remember watching The Office. I think it was like season 3 or 4 when Steve Carell during the break shot 40-Year-Old Virgin.
Oh yeah.
And I only saw Steve Carell as like the straight man, little obviously very quirky, very office rocker as Michael Scott.
Yeah.
But then my uncle had, after it got out of the theaters, he had 40-Year-Old Virgin on DVD, and he was like, check this out.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, holy, what? You can do this?
Well, you know.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, and you know what you might be attracted to is, what I love about it too is the character that he played, and what you learned at the Second City too, is your characters are like fully formed. So yes, they're quirky, and thank you very much.
Sure.
They're quirky and fun, but there's this heart and kind of soul to them, and that's how they operate. And I find if I play a character, I'm not likening myself to any of these people, but if I play a character, I find it's very much easier to improvise because then you're seeing the world through those eyes. So I tell people that are interested in that, the Second City, of course, and I've done it as an example of naming these people, is they're great at being like, oh, all these people that have been here. And then they have thousands of people in their training center.
But it's like crazy exclusive, and it's incredibly tough to get in there. Like,
it's insane.
Their attrition rate, as far as like getting in, is akin to an actually tougher if you're actually looking at it numerically, but it's akin to an Ivy League school.
Oh, that's funny you say that because a big tagline they use is like it's the Harvard of hilarity, and getting into the National Lampoon at Harvard I'm sure is equally difficult. When I got in, they auditioned 600 people and they hired 6 of us. So I didn't sleep, of course, for 2 weeks before this audition. And what's crazy with stand-up, you're like I always compare improvisation to stand-up is when you're a stand-up, you're a salesperson, you're like, these are my wares. And the audience goes, yes, we like your wares. And it's a polished thing. You go, I take a breath here, and I have some little bit of play here, and I know this bit works here. When you improvise, and you have to audition for something like the Second City, what's nuts is like, how do you prepare? So because I was from small town New Mexico, what I did, I was luckily, there was a great public library system. So I went and I watched the American Film Institute top 100 films over a shorter amount of time. I read because it's theater, Second City theater, it's still a comedy club.
What movies do you remember? Like,
there's so many good ones.
What movie, maybe like 2 or 3 of them, do you remember at that time that really like stuck with you?
And I always say it's sometimes like my pretentious answer when people go, what's your favorite movie? But I love a movie called The Apartment with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine.
I've never seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
It's it's Billy Wilder, who was he directed like everything, Some Like It Hot and Sunset Boulevard. But there's something about Jack Lemmon's character, and Shirley MacLaine is so cute and hot. Like, we think of the woman that used to live in Santa Fe, you know, and you're like, she believes in aliens, whatever. You're like, really? I go, yeah, watch that movie. I think it's I don't want to say wrong, 59, 69. But it's just the dark, and it's not an upbeat movie. It's like a dark subject matter, but it's so interesting because as opposed to funny lines, it's characters' behavior that draws you in. And like a lot of people, I have an affinity for like the 50s and 60s where like guys wore suits. And you know, and it was like martini lunches and all that. It's like, oh, it's amazing.
Well, that's very much a part of your persona. When you go up on, yeah. I mean, I didn't only seen like twice go up on and actually do stand up, but like, just you're very classic performer. Mm. Like it's very akin to oh my God, I'm Lenny Bruce.
Oh wow, I appreciate that.
Yeah, very much in that same vein. And then like seeing the pictures out of Casadas where you're wearing a full suit, I'm like, not surprised. Anybody else outside of like maybe you and Buck is very formal when he has those big.
Oh yeah, he looks
like
great
that.
too.
He loves doing that, and that's one thing that he really impressed upon me when I first started stand up was he's a big reason why I started too.
Oh cool.
But he was like professionalism. Like professionalism is key. Like you need to get that down early on and don't get complacent with that because that's a huge part of you going forward. Was your professionalism with how you treat people, how you show up, how you present yourself, how you look, so on and so forth. But yeah, when I saw the pictures come out of Casadas, you're in a suit. Like, yeah, that makes sense.
And for me, you know what it is for me too? It's a tribute to all my heroes. Like when I was a kid, I loved Jonathan Winters, who was this great improviser.
Oh, for sure.
I think one of the funniest people to ever live. And so he always wore a suit. And the Second City wears suit. Like me and Chris Red, when we did shows together, both in suits, looking like
Chris Red in a suit.
Can you imagine that? It's like we looked like we were junior executives, you know, or salesmen at Brooks Brothers or something. But we would be backstage. I remember shows we'd be backstage in our suits, and I love it because it also is a armor to a certain degree. Where I like wearing a suit, especially at any degree of show. I just came off a tour that was great because it was 37 cities in about 2 months. And what I like about that is I played a lot of theaters, and sometimes in those places, I overthink a lot of things. But if I play a really nice theater, what I'll do that night in my dressing room is I will wear tennis shoes with my nice suit because I want to play against the environment I'm in. Now, I found out because I was playing casinos like in Minnesota and in Wisconsin, and sometimes you're in a weird banquet room. That's when I'll wear dress shoes because I want to be against whatever the thing is. If it's super formal, I want the audience to know a little bit just through my appearance. They're like, oh, he's us. To a certain degree, I want to be like, oh, that's us up there. Because then, like, if I'm a little quirky or I do something, they're like, oh, he's kind of the every guy a little bit.